in the best interest of Mr. Young. And if Mr. Young would like to get up and explain this, I would like to hear his explanation. I yield back my time.
Well, please don't yield it quite yet.
I won't yield quite yet.
The time of the gentleman from Washington has expired.
You can get time.
Okay.
Mr. Young.
For what purpose, gentleman from Alaska, rise? Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
And all, Mr. Chairman, members of the body, in all due respects, this is about the state's rights. This bill does not preclude the state of Alaska, the Coast Guard, or any other entity from enforcement on the Yukon River. It does not let the Park Service, they can still move on the river. But it does not allow them to enforce inspections of boats on the river that are private. Not in a business, but private. And I have to tell you a little story about this, and this is the reason I'm very adamant about it. The Park Service is for the people. It's not for the Park Service. And the Park Service in Alaska has become, very frankly, like I would say an occupied army of a free territory. And to give you an example, this man that was arrested was 70 years old with his wife, who happened to be from Germany. And I'm going to bring that up a little later. And a couple. 70 years old, 69 years old, and 68 years old. On a cruise on the Yukon River and a very seaworthy boat, Coast Guard inspected, and there was another boat on the river, and there was a distress signal given by the Park Service. And being a good Samaritan, they went over to help them out. And as they approached the boat, they flashed their badges and says, "We're the Park Service, we're going to board your vessel and inspect you for safety and registration." Think about this. A distress signal, and then we're going to board your boat, and maritime law says you will not board a boat on a moving river. You have to put it to shore. And the guy said, "Up yours, I'm going to go to shore." And that's what he did. And he gets to the shore, he gets out of the boat. The Rangers have already got a shotgun on a 70-year-old man and carrying a pistol out of their holster. And as the guy walked toward them, they started to say something. He's turning around and walks back. They tackled him and rolled him in the mud, a 70-year-old man. These are two young bucks, cowboys, and handcuffed this man, this 70-year-old man, and made him sit on the shore. And they took him a great distance down the river to a village and flew him to Fairbanks, drove him to Fairbanks, handcuffed. A 70-year-old man. This is your Park Service? This is not my Park Service. Well, it did go to trial, and the judge hasn't rendered the decision yet. In the first place, the state never gave them the authority to do any inspections. In the second place, they never gave them the authority. By the way, the Coast Guard did not give them the authority. And they do not have jurisdiction over that water. That's state's water. As every state in this union, it is the state's water. To have the Park Service act like that is dead wrong. So I'm asking you to support this amendment. This is an amendment that should be adopted because we have agencies today are acting like, very frankly, like occupied. Now, the lady I brought up was from Germany. And during the trial, they asked her, the prosecution, "Did you ever have a gun pointed at you?" And she said, "Yes, by the SS troops." Now, that gives you an idea. A 70-year-old lady, and have them point a shotgun at him? Now, that's wrong. Now, why you say it sets the precedent? Yes, it sets the precedent because the state's waters. And this amendment should not be accepted. We should leave it in the bill as it is. It's the right thing to do. I say vote down that amendment. Think about the little people. Quit thinking about these agencies. These agencies aren't God. Think about the little people. Those people are abused by agencies and you're paying for them. And by the way, the one ranger had a record as longer than my arms. And they hired him to enforce the so-called parks regulations. So I'm asking you to think about this a moment. It's the wrong amendment. This is the right thing to do. It's time we start telling these agencies, think of the people, not the parks themselves. This is about parks and partners, and they're certainly not partners in Alaska. They say, we're going to educate Alaskans about Alaska. Now, this is a 70-year-old man who's been living there all his life. And to have that happen is dead wrong. And I yield back the balance of my time.
What purpose, gentleman from Virginia, rise?
I rise to strike the last word, Mr. Chairman.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, in response to my very good friend, it appears that the conduct of these park rangers was wrong. So they have been reassigned. And I'm sure that whoever has responsibility now in that jurisdiction has been told, you don't do this. Now, these kinds of things happen all over the country, if not all over the world, clearly. Some people in authority abuse their power. It happens with local police departments. It happens state police. It happens with other people with a badge. And so they get disciplined. Sometimes they get taken to court. But normally, we don't change national policy to deal with misconduct, if that's what it was, on the part of certain individuals. We don't change national policy, and that's what you're trying to do. Let me put into this discussion and deliberation the fact that they had to go through national park land to get to that state water. Well, they do, and the National Park Service runs the concessions. So the National Park Service does have responsibility for some of the vehicles on this water. They don't know if there's contraband stuff coming. They don't know what's on the vessel. Now, my guess is, I don't know for sure, my guess is it's very seldom that they're going to stop and board any boat. They would probably have to have some reason. I'm sure now, after this incident, they have to have very substantial reason. But it's entirely conceivable that some point in the future they're going to have very substantial reason to stop and board a boat. And we have precluded their ability to carry out their responsibility. So that's why we're concerned about the precedent. We're not concerned about the fact that if there was misconduct, that these folks have been reassigned. We're sure that the instructions that have been given by superiors have changed now to ensure that this incident is never repeated. But we really don't think that the solution is to change national policy, which would have repercussions for other national preserves around the country, and it might very seriously have ramifications on this particular one in the future that we can't tell right now. So I'd be happy to yield to my colleague.
Again, I plead with my friend from Alaska. You have made your case. You have gotten the relief for your constituents. The rangers have been reassigned. Accept victory and don't give us an amendment that would undermine boat safety inspections. And that's what this amendment does. He says, right, let me read this amendment. None of the funds made available by this Act may be used by the Secretary of Interior to implement or enforce regulations concerning boating and other activities on or relating to waters located within Yukon-Charlie National Preserve, including waters subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, pursuant to Section 3(8) of Public Law, or any other authority.
And if the gentleman reclaim my time, it's clear that's not just the waterway. That includes
the entire
all of the
park.
land. All of the entire park on this national preserve. They can't carry out their responsibilities. We're not just talking about the water.
Will the gentleman yield? No. It is not their responsibility. This is the state waters.
It's a national.
It is not.
It's within
the Yukon River. I made a living on
it. It's within a national park.
All members suspend. The time is controlled by the gentleman from Virginia, and members will yield time appropriately to each other. The gentleman from Virginia.
Would my very good friend from Alaska like me to yield him a few seconds
I'd love to
try to clarify what seems to be inexplicable?
I would love to have you yield to me. Again, this is the Yukon-Charlie. The Yukon River that was used by the Gold Rush people has been used by Alaskans all these years without the Park Service. The state has authority over the waters. The Coast Guard has authority for inspection. The state has authority for registration, not the Park Service. This is the navigable water. That is our water. Now, the land is there on one side, but it is our water. And may I just continue for one thing? I have not won because I may have won a temporary battle, but it can be another park ranger, rangers. There can be another park superintendent that does not listen to anyone.
Reclaiming
where
my,
are we?
Reclaiming my time, the language is clear. It applies to all waters, not just navigable waters.
It says Yukon. There's only navigable water is the Yukon.
It's possible if the language was more specific, we wouldn't have quite the trouble with it.
The gentleman will,
yes, I'd be happy to
again,
yield to the ranking
relating to
member.
waters located within Yukon-Charlie National Preserve, including waters subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. The Park Service has, when you have...
Time of the gentleman from Virginia has expired.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent the gentleman have another 2 minutes so he can yield to me.
Is there objection? Without objection, the gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 additional minutes.
Be happy to yield to the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding, and I appreciate my friend from Washington reading the section, but he left out the last section, the last sentence of that section. And I think this is a pertinent part, and this is a point that the gentleman from Alaska is making, and it's regard to safety inspection. And it goes on, and I'll quote out the last sentence. This section does not affect the authority of the Coast Guard to regulate the use of waters subject to the jurisdiction of the United States within the Yukon-Charlie Preserve, end quote. Now, I would interpret that as saying the safety part of that is taken care of, but the gentleman from Alaska certainly is right on the part that these are state waters. And I appreciate the gentleman from yielding.
I was happy to yield. I would respond to the gentleman. The Coast Guard really doesn't spend much time on rivers. It's normally on coastal waters. It may have responsibility, but the fact is that the Coast Guard normally doesn't apply much in the way of resource. I'd like to know, how large is this national preserve? Because I suspect it's a very expansive national preserve that we're talking about. Do we know?
I don't know, but I'm sure the gentleman does.
Mr. Young might know.
You yield to me? Will the gentleman yield? Mr.
It's my time, so I'll yield to Mr. It's my time, Mr. Young. Yeah, it's. But I'll yield to.
Have jurisdiction. How does the Coast Guard have jurisdiction? That's another federal agency. The gentleman changed his story down in the gym and told me that it was the state that had authority.
Will you yield?
I would wonder who in the hell has authority.
You're from Washington. You don't know who has navigation.
I don't have the time.
You don't know what.
Yes.
Again, the chair requests that members use the proper yielding to each other for time. The time's controlled by the gentleman from Virginia.
I very much thank the chair of the full committee for clarifying who has the time. Now,
Stand over here.
I think a number of very good questions have been raised by the ranking member of the full committee, the Appropriations Committee, and we are concerned about this precedent. We're also concerned about the safety of people who use this national preserve. We can understand Mr. Young's angst, but nevertheless, we have a responsibility not to establish precedent that may come back to haunt us.
Time of the gentleman has expired. For what purpose, gentleman from Washington?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out that the staff clearly, researched the language here and the applicable laws that relate to these waters. I mean, that's what we do when we put this language in here. With that, I'll yield to the gentleman from Alaska.
Well, to answer the gentleman, the Coast Guard has all authority for enforcement on all waters, including all rivers. In fact, sometimes the Coast Guard is too active on the rivers as far as I'm concerned. I've been on that river, and like I say, I'm a tugboat captain, a licensed mariner, and my biggest challenge to this is the excessive use of the Park Service. Now, you say I won that battle. Like I said before, that doesn't keep them from trying to enforce this again over the state's objections. The state didn't give them the right to register the boats or check registration. The Coast Guard didn't give them the right to inspect the boat. And remember this now. Here's two guys giving a distress signal, and a good citizen tried to help them, and they flash a badge. This sounds like you-know-what to me.
If the gentleman
and that's not a good thing. And I get very frustrated because you ought to leave this as it in the bill. Let the Park Service know they no longer can trod over the people of Alaska because they are part of the federal government. They are the Park Service. You better listen to us. When this man was breaking no laws, this is wrong. Now, you say I've won the battle. Maybe I have. But it took a lot of effort to do it, but I haven't won the war, and they will come back. So I'm suggesting to stay in the bill as it is. It's very, very important. And I'll Yield back my time.
Yield back my time.
Can we yield back? For what purpose, gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
No kidding.
The gentleman moves to strike the requisite number of words and is recognized for 5 minutes.
And I do so really just to ensure that we understand that this is a huge 2.5 million acre park, and that what we're talking about here is a 158-mile long river in the middle of this park. Okay, so we're talking about a huge area. We got you.
The river's 2,800 miles long.
What?
The river's 2,800 miles long.
This part of
one
it.
one little tiny section. This is a river, is 5 miles
Right.
away, 2,800 miles long, third largest river in the United States of America.
Right.
Carries transportation.
Right. I thank the. I'll reclaim my time to say that the 158-mile area is the portion of the river inside of the park, the 2.5 million acre park. And so what the gentleman is suggesting, it seems to me that he believes, and I understand that the National Park Service or an individual officer made a mistake here, that they abused their authority. And I understand that. You know, when I was a boy, my favorite television show when I was 9, 10, 11 was Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. And he had his faithful horse Rex and his dog Yukon King, and each week, you know, at 5 o'clock on Friday, he would come out to patrol the Yukon. And he worked for the Canadian Royal Mounties. Now, I would like to think that if he ever made a mistake, if he ever overstepped his boundaries, if he ever improperly treated anyone that he was in the process of arresting, that the punishment would be that the Mounties could never again, any of them, go into the Yukon. Because that would seem to me to kind of result in a less fully implemented set of law enforcement principles in that area. So what we're learning here is that the punishment to the National Park Service for potentially something that 1 or 2 officers engaged in is that none of them can continue their policing, which the Coast Guard says they need. In fact, this is in many ways such a remote part of the Yukon that the Coast Guard right now relies upon the Park Service police to police these areas. And the answer which we're getting from the gentleman from Alaska is, and I understand the example that he's trying to make of this one particular incident, is that you're using this as something I think that is illustrative, okay, and perhaps just to highlight it. But I don't think you really want the result of a reduction in the overall enforcement of the laws inside of the park, because that's what would result here. So the partnership between the Coast Guard and the Park Service on this river and all that abuts the river is something that is seamless. It's worked for generations, and it's something that everyone seems to support. So I guess what I would say to you is that perhaps you could target this a little bit more narrowly, but not to punish the entire Park Service and every officer in the Park Service. It's like every person who works there is now going to suffer as a result of this amendment, and I don't think that's what you intend. And so I guess what I would say is that I would support the amendment of the gentleman from Washington State. It will, I think, make it possible for us to come back and maybe take another look at it, but not in a way that undermines this partnership that has existed up there for a generation, which has worked. And if there's an exception, by the way, if there's an exception in any police department, that person who did something wrong should not lead to that entire police department never again being able to enforce the laws. That would be an indictment of everyone. Okay, so I just think that to the extent to which the Dix Amendment seeks to repeal or delete the provision which is in the bill, it doesn't mean that you can't come back and talk about something that might be more specific. I'll be glad to yield to the gentleman from Washington State.
Here is we're talking about safety. We're talking about inspecting boats that may be unsafe. And I think that is an important issue that we should not deal with in an across-the-board way here in this bill. And I think the gentleman from Alaska has made his point. I think he should withdraw this amendment. I mean, I think he should support our amendment to strike this in order to make sure that the people of Alaska are protected. I know he cares about them.
If I can reclaim my time, the effect of this amendment could be, because the Coast Guard relies upon the Park Service, is that we could wind up with an entire area without any law enforcement, because the Coast Guard does not reach that area. The Park Service is there. If you take out the Park Service, it becomes much more of a dangerous place for everyone, and I don't think that's really what the gentleman intends.
Time of the gentleman's expired. For what purpose, gentleman from Idaho, rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
This has been a fascinating debate to listen to, as the gentleman from Massachusetts and the gentleman from Virginia tell the gentleman from Alaska how it works in Alaska. I will tell you that he knows more about Alaska than any of you ever thought of knowing. The problem is, you say you're trying to save Mr. Young from himself by offering this amendment. We're trying to save the Park Service from itself and the actions that it's taken. Now, logically, your argument says, gee, if people had problems in their own areas, then you might see other amendments come like this and would be setting a precedent. Exactly. If we can't have oversight about what goes on and what the Park Service does, why are we even here? You heard the story that I won't repeat, that what happened to this gentleman, Mr. Wild, on the river. We all agree that it's a problem. And in fact, when the Park Service tells the gentleman, stops him in the middle of the river and tells him to shut down his boat, to shut down his motors, and as they testified in court, they refused to shut down theirs because it was unsafe, who's being protected? That's the point. Safety inspections of these, let me finish, safety inspections of these boats will not stop. The statutory authority is given to the Coast Guard. That's who has the statutory authority, not the Park Service.
Now, wait a minute.
That's the debate
gentleman
that's
from
going
Alaska
on here.
said it was the state of Alaska.
This language is intended to only limit the Park Service's authority to engage in boater safety checks on the Yukon River within the Yukon-Charlie National Preserve, the only non-ocean navigable waterway within Alaska's national parks. It's important to note that this language will not have any effect on the ability of the Coast Guard to conduct their statutorily granted powers of conducting boater safety checks. It is intended to avoid similar incidents between the Park Service and the public. And yes, when Mr. Young brought this up originally, the manager of the Park Service could have said, you're right, there is a problem there, and I'll get rid of these people. They didn't do that. It took this to bring about the actions that have finally occurred, that they've been dismissed from that region. We're trying to prevent the Park Service from harming themselves, and I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman from Texas, or gentleman from Alaska.
Well, we're just twice as big as Texas, 2.5 times. But just keep in mind, the Coast Guard has this authority. As soon as this happened, I called the Coast Guard, because the Park Service said the Coast Guard had granted them that authority. The Coast Guard, no way. That's our authority. And then secondly, they said registration. Only the state has a right to register a boat. That's the same thing in your state, not any federal agency. As far as only 130 miles, remember, this is the Highway of Alaska. The Highway of Alaska has been used for hundreds of years. And we got along very well without any Park Service all these years. All these years. And by the way, I don't think there was a drowning because of a boat accident on that section of the river in history. So why, of a sudden, you want me to protect the Alaskan people that do not like this? I do not understand. Very frankly, I think you're meddling. You're meddling in something that the state has a great interest in, that has said before, this is our waterway. We have a right to progress it from Canada through Alaska all the way down to the Bering Sea. And to have an agency that the taxpayer pays for, by the way, had an illegal boat. The boat they were driving was overpowered according to the Coast Guard. So just leave this in the bill as it should, and I'm asking all of my colleagues to think about this very carefully. Do you want an agency that does not respect the rights of individuals because they work for the government? Does not respect the rights of history? I don't think you do. So I'm asking the amendment to be defeated and asking for my colleagues to understand this is a big issue in my state. It's very, very important, not only to me but to my people, the people of the state of Alaska that have been using that river for centuries. So let's just leave it in the bill, and I yield back to the gentleman.
I'd be happy to yield, gentleman from Washington.
You know, we have people in the law enforcement area who make mistakes. Well, we don't get rid of law enforcement. We don't say we're no longer going to protect people, the other people. We go through a process and correct what that officer did. I think the gentleman gets the gist of what I'm
reclaiming my time. We're not getting rid of law enforcement here. No. The Coast Guard will still do the safety inspections, which they are statutorily authorized to do. The Park Service is not statutorily authorized to do. They say that they have been given that authority from the Coast Guard. No. I don't think that's the case. So we're not getting rid of anything. What we're doing is clearing up a jurisdictional problem here.
Would the gentleman yield just for a second?
Sure.
I would hope that we could clarify this. There seems to be a misunderstanding here. I hope that we can, if my amendment doesn't prevail, that we could try to work together to clarify this before conference.
I'll guarantee there's a misunderstanding here.
Okay, well, let's try to see if we can straighten that out.
The time of the gentleman has expired, and the chair would again remind all members that they should direct their comments to the chair, not to each other. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise? Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
There's no doubt, Mr. Young, that you are the renowned expert on Alaska. So I don't rise to counter that. And in fact, I come from the other open, wild state that likes their own self-determination, and they just associated you with the state of Texas. I remind my colleagues that there's water in Virginia, there's water in Massachusetts, and there's water all along. But I rise to support the gentleman's amendment because, frankly, the last time I talked to the very important Coast Guard, they're short on money. Frankly, I want the Coast Guard to be in the Port of Houston doing their job as relates to protecting the coastline of America from terrorists. They are involved in that. They are not, in essence, an agency that can just expand its resources. I would just raise the question. I think the gentleman from Washington was very engaging and cooperative by saying, how can we work this out? My interpretation is, in opposing the language that's in the bill and supporting Mr. Dix, is that we have, in essence, a legislative earmark. And that means that all of us can rise up and try to solve our problems in that way. I'd like to get back to regular order. And I cite for all of you just another example. We've got a legislative earmark when one of our colleagues, Republican colleagues, has decided to shut down the FAA. That's an example. And lost in the doing of that $2.5 billion construction projects, 87,000 American construction jobs, 3,000 FAA aviation engineers furloughed, safety analysts, career professionals in 35 states, and in my own city of Houston. I want to get on the floor and put an amendment on the floor to get that member out of the business of stopping the FAA from doing its work. $200 million per week is being lost. Nobody is saying anything because we're also not doing regular order by fooling around with the debt ceiling. Nobody can come together and act like adults and say, let's just raise the debt ceiling so the American people can go on with their business. Now we've got a member that says, my way or the highway, and shutting down the FAA. You can't run the government like this. And I think the message of the amendment that is on the floor is not that we don't respect members' personal knowledge of their states. It's just that we can't go willy-nilly and change laws just for isolated incidences. And I apologize to Mr. Weil. But you can see I'm pretty agitated about a situation where we are quietly allowing the FAA not to work. And as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, who knows what danger is around because the FAA is not functioning? Who knows what jeopardy we're putting for seniors and students and families and people trying to buy a home because we're fooling around with the debt ceiling? So I just think we're in a pattern here. Do what you want to do and forget the heck of the American people and forget that we live in a big country and that we should be for all of the people. And if we need safety on our waterways, we need to find a way to work through our issues. I don't like the way individuals were handled. I agree on that issue. But I certainly don't like the way we're handling our business with the debt ceiling when we are literally putting ourselves on the jeopardy. And I encourage the President to do anything he needs to do to save the American people. and to be able to move forward so that we don't lose all of our resources and opportunities for the Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security recipients of America. And I hope he stands up and recognizes this is a ridiculous position to be in when the FAA is not even functioning, and my Bush Intercontinental Airport can't even continue doing its construction work, and the people who need the work are thrown out on the streets because they can't work because one lone member wants to get up and talk about the FAA and foolishness about not protecting small airports and not allowing our airport employees or our employees such as air traffic controllers and others to be able to confer about the quality of work issues. So I would just suggest that you might be able to find a solution, Mr. Young. I know you know all of the issues about that. We have a lot of water from where I come from. I think Mr. Dix has put forth a perfect question and then an answer to the idea of whether or not your amendment or language would have a far-reaching impact beyond Mr. Weil and the unfortunate behavior of two individuals that I understand may not be here. Let's look at this holistically as we need to look at this nation. Let's come together as adults representing the American people. And I thank the gentleman for the time. And is there any time that you want? And I'm happy to yield back by asking for all the support for Mr. Dix's amendment. I yield back.
Time, gentlelady, has expired. Members are again reminded to direct their comments to the chair, not to each other. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young. Those in favor say aye. Gentleman is exactly right. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Dix. Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed to the amendment say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Dix, will be postponed. For what purpose, gentleman from New Jersey, rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word, and I promise I'll stick to the subject.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in strong opposition to the underlying Bill 2584, a bill which irresponsibly slashes funding for many of our nation's most important environmental and infrastructure programs. If it's passed, the overall legislation would cause grave harm to the health and safety of our communities, in addition, removing protections for our wildlife and environment. I'll take a few issues at hand. Clean water infrastructure. Ensuring our families have clean water is under attack in this bill. It cuts 55%, almost $1 billion, from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. This program enables the states to invest in much-needed repairs and improvements to aging water infrastructure. Mr. Chairman, an estimated 25% of all treated water in the United States of America is lost due to leakage from water systems that are in disrepair. 25% of the water that's already been treated. What a waste of money. And supposedly an austere Congress. We're facing a $500 billion funding gap to bring aging water and wastewater infrastructure back to par. Our pipes are literally crumbling beneath our feet, out of sight, out of mind, until the next major water main break disrupts our lives and our towns. This investment in water infrastructure has the potential to generate thousands and thousands of American jobs, since every $1 billion in infrastructure investment supports 28,500 jobs. Second issue, air quality. The bill that's before us takes us further backwards to an era where polluters positioned our atmosphere at will by preventing the EPA from implementing two important air quality rules, the power plant air toxics rule and the transport rule, irresponsibly putting the health of our communities at risk. We're going backwards instead of frontwards. Air pollution disproportionately impacts the urban areas in my district, such as Paterson, New Jersey, where we see much higher incidences of asthma. It is terrible. Go to our hospitals. It is out of control, not just in Paterson, New Jersey, but across the United States. Other respiratory ailments due to the concentrations of harmful pollutants. These pollutants can become lodged in the tissues of the lungs and interfere with the respiratory system. This needs to be controlled. And the park system itself, it was referred to in the last debate. This proposed legislation would cripple the operation of the National Park Service. This service takes care of our parks. We fought for this, all of us, Democrats, Republicans, in whatever state it was in this union. They want to slash this by $409 million from the President's request. Our national parks are visited by 275 million people each year, come from all over the world to appreciate our country's natural and historic wonders. In my district, the Park Service is hard at work on the Great Falls National Historic Park, right in my home city of Paterson, the only historic park in the entire nation where there's an aesthetic as well as an historical accomplishment here as the first industrial city of the United States. The investment we make in our parks pays for itself many times over in economic development and in the surrounding areas, the enjoyment and education they provide to Americans of all ages. We must ensure that the Park Service has the resources they require to ensure that parks all over the country are properly operated. How about the arts and humanities in this legislation? Besides the huge cited cuts to our health, infrastructure, and environment, the bill before us drastically cuts funding to the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. As a former teacher, as a member of the Congressional Arts Caucus, many of us are, I have seen firsthand the positive impact that our arts and humanities education have on the success of our students. In my district, as a result of the economic crisis, many schools have been forced to cut back on arts programs, to lay off arts teachers. They're the first to go. In conclusion, let me say this. I would say, Mr. Chairman, that this legislation needs a lot to be desired. And I yield back my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Clerk will read.
Page 57, line 10, direct hire authority. Section 117, the Secretary may appoint a qualified candidate to a position with a land managing agency for which the candidate meets qualification standards. Review process for certain Bureau of Land Management actions.
Mr. Chairman.
Section 118.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Dix of Washington, page 58, beginning on line 13, strike section 118.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment.
I rise in support of my amendment. This would strike section 118, which amends the administrative appeals procedure for grazing decisions on public land to require parties to exhaust all administrative appeals before they may file suit in federal court. This is a backdoor attempt to curtail the use of court injunctions to stop grazing decisions made by the BLM. Without the ability to seek injunctive relief, opponents of a grazing decision are handicapped because irreparable damage to a resource may occur while the administrative appeal process is being exhausted. And I would yield to the ranking member to further discuss this amendment.
I thank the distinguished gentleman for yielding. We hear from a number of people and organizations around the country who are concerned about this because without the ability to seek injunctive relief from the courts, opponents of a grazing decision are very much handicapped because irreparable damage to a resource may occur while the administrative appeals process is being exhausted. So that's our concern. I know that's the concern of the ranking member of the full committee. But let me share another concern that I think underlies this whole issue of grazing. Currently, I know the ranking member is aware of this, the federal government charges $1.35 per month per cow to graze on federally owned land. In the meantime, states like Idaho charge 5 times that, $5.12. Montana, $6.12. Nebraska can charge up to $41 per acre to graze on state-owned land. Texas, I know the gentleman is aware of this, Texas will charge $65 to $150 per acre per cow. But the federal government charges $1.35. Now that's the kind of federal subsidy that we really think we ought to go after. When we're cutting deeply into the bone programs for people who are destitute, programs that are absolutely necessary to protect our environment, for needed infrastructure in this country, we're giving this kind of a subsidy, $1.35 for federal, to graze on federal land, versus as much as $65 to $150 that the great state of Texas charges to graze on state land. And then private land is oftentimes even more expensive. So that's the kind of subsidy that really, I don't think it passes the test of scrutiny if the taxpayer was really aware of the kind of subsidy they're providing some grazers on their federally owned land. It ought to be rectified, but this particular issue simply rubs salt into that wound. I yield back to the gentleman.
And I yield back. I again ask for support of my amendment.
For a purpose, gentleman from Idaho.
Move to strike last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I appreciate the gentleman from Virginia's concern about the cost or the subsidies or whatever he wants to call it, but it has absolutely nothing to do with this amendment. It's a whole different issue. Should the Resources Committee be looking at the price that's charged for cattle grazing, for mining, other things? Sure they should be. Not the purpose of this bill. It's not the purpose of this amendment. All this amendment says is that in the past, BLM regulations have required litigants to exhaust the administrative review before litigating in federal court. That means they have to go through the review process that's been set up administratively before they can go to court. Recently, numerous lawsuits over grazing have been filed in federal courts before the administrative review process has been completed. That means they haven't gone through to find out whether they'd win or lose on the administrative side. This ties up the BLM field offices because they must respond to both an administrative process on one side and a litigation process on the other side. This provision simply requires litigants to first exhaust the administrative review before litigating grazing issues in federal court. Litigants could still file for temporary restraining orders, contrary to what you said. They have to show irreparable harm, and they can still file for temporary restraining orders. Nothing in this provision prevents that. I would hope, and I know the good ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Dix, because we've talked about this before, if we could spend more money actually managing the lands rather than in court, we would all be better off. All this says is follow the administrative procedures, exhaust them before you go to court. You still have that option after those administrative procedures have been exhausted, and as I said, you can still get a restraining order if there's irreparable harm. This, I think, will cut down on the lawsuits, and I think this is a good provision in the bill, and I would hope that the gentleman from Washington and Virginia would recognize how well the underlying bill is written and would withdraw their amendment.
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
I am told that the ability to offer a temporary restraining order is very narrowly drafted, and so where irreparable harm, that wouldn't do it. It's only if you would. I yield to the gentleman.
Thank you. If the gentleman would yield, it's only if a federal court finds that the agency failed or was unable to make information timely available during the administrative review, according to this language. So it's probably going to be
reclaiming my time. That's
Yep.
the standard that exists now, as I understand it. We're not changing that.
If the gentleman would,
I'd be happy to yield.
I'd like to make 2 points. One is that this is clearly authorizing language on an appropriations bill. If we're going to change the law, then it ought to be done by the authorizing committee. But secondly, I know the gentleman is aware you can only get an injunction from a federal judge if you can prove that you are likely to win your case or if there is imminent harm. So I don't know why the gentleman is so concerned about the existing legal situation.
Reclaiming my time,
yeah.
to answer your question, the reason I'm concerned is the extraordinary amount of money that we are spending in court instead of on managing public lands. That's the real issue here. And we have a process set up where if you have problems, you can go through an administrative process. Go through it. If at the end you don't like the outcome, go to court. That's all we're saying. And is this legislating on an appropriation bill? Well, I guess funding unauthorized programs is legislating on an appropriation bill also, which we've done in several provisions in this bill, so which you support. So I yield back the balance of my time and hope my colleagues will vote against this amendment.
Chairman yields back. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Dix. Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Clerk will read.
Page 59, line 16, Gray Wolves, Section 119.
Mr. Chairman,
For what purpose, gentleman from Washington rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Dix of Washington. Page 59, beginning on line 16, strike Section 119.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes.
Section 119 exempts from judicial review any final rule of the Secretary of Interior that delists wolves in Wyoming or the Western Great Lakes states, provided the Fish and Wildlife Service has noticed and entered into an agreement with the state for it to manage the wolves. The irony here is that the majority does not trust any action of Secretary Salazar except if it involves the delisting of wolves. The writer undercuts the public's right to petition a federal court to review an agency's decision and blocks the court's ability to carry out its customary authority to review executive branch decisions. Now, I have been a strong proponent of the reintroduction of the gray wolf into Yellowstone and in other areas. This has been one of the most successful operations in restoring a species that had been completely wiped out in our country. And today we're seeing all of the benefits of this. So I don't think we should undercut the people's right to go to court if they don't think the agency has done this according to the law. And I have great respect for Secretary Salazar, and I'm sure he would agree with me that there should not be a prohibition on judicial review. And I'd like to yield to the distinguished ranking member for any comments he would have on this.
I thank the gentleman. My only observation is it's ironic that the majority doesn't seem to trust anything that Secretary Salazar does except if it involves the delisting of wolves. This rider does undercut the public's right to petition a federal court to review an agency's decision. So, we're establishing a precedent here with regard to wolves. It blocks the court's ability to carry out its customary authority to review executive branch decisions. That's the way the system's supposed to work. The executive branch makes a determination, and in our system, if there are individuals or organizations that don't agree, then they have recourse to the judicial system. This says, no, we're going to suspend that part of the Constitution. No, you can't go to the courts. The executive branch is inviolate here. They make a decision, that's it, permanent. Well, we like Secretary Salazar, and we support Secretary Salazar far more consistently than the majority does, if the majority supports him on anything. But, we don't really see why we need to suspend the constitutional process in this particular specific, unique circumstance. So I would support the gentleman's amendment.
And again, I ask for support for my amendment. I think it corrects a flaw in this bill. And believe me, there are a lot of flaws.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move to oppose my friend's amendment. I hope this isn't a pattern long-term, but on this particular bill, it seems to be a pattern at any rate. His amendment would strike the important language in H.R. 2584 that addresses the administration's confusing policies involving the Endangered Species Act listed populations of gray wolves nationwide. As I mentioned on the House floor during a colloquy with Chairman Simpson on Monday, the Obama administration has created a confusing and impractical result with its recent announcement to delist the gray wolves in some states, but leaves other states, such as Washington, Oregon, and Utah, with mixed management. H.R. 2584, as written and as clarified in my colloquy with the chairman, would help remedy this flawed policy. Problems with the federal management of gray wolves are nearly as old as the Endangered Species Act itself. 5 years after ESA's passage in 1978, the gray wolf was listed as endangered or threatened in all of the lower 48 states. In the mid-1990s, the Clinton administration ordered an experimental introduction of wolves into the Yellowstone area, central Idaho, and the Mexican wolf into Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. It also established a new definition to identify the population of listed species. As a result, wolves multiplied, but unfortunately, because they can't read maps, they moved into areas where they weren't supposed to go. In 2003, the Fish and Wildlife Service divided gray wolves into geographical boundaries that made more sense. It included the entire states of Washington, Oregon, Utah, and other areas, so that states would eventually be able to develop their own state management plans to remove wolves from the endangered species list. Then, in 2009, the Obama administration reversed course and adopted the theory that wolves should be delisted in Idaho, Montana, and only parts of certain other states. That would leave those areas, but would leave other areas where wolves likely populate still listed under ESA. As a result, in my own 4th Congressional District in central Washington, and I'll put up a map here, the wolves are delisted on the eastern side of Highways 97, 17, and 395. Highway 97, Highway 17, and 395. Delisted over here, listed over here. This makes absolutely no sense, and it shows how the ESA is badly in need of updating and how ineffective the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is in managing wolves. And I might add, this is true in Oregon, in parts of Oregon, and parts of Utah. So I oppose this amendment because the colloquy that I had with the chairman is one that sets the stage for properly managing these wolves in the states that I associated with. And I just might add on a personal level. I live very, very close to here. But I live in the listed area. Now, we do fish marking. I know my friend is very well of fish marking, and I'm not opposing the authorizing on this bill, as the gentleman knows, this year, at any rate. But there is no listing here for the gray wolf. Now, I have no idea if a wolf crosses down here into my area, if it is in fact a listed or a delisted wolf. But apparently Fish and Wildlife thinks that they know where Highway 17 or Highway 97 ends, where 17 comes down here and connects with Highway 395, because that's what their arbitrary rule says. It doesn't make any sense at all. And so as a result of this, the colloquy I had with Chairman Simpson clarified this, that it includes the whole areas that are under that geographic boundary, and for that reason I oppose my friend's amendment, and with that I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the... For what purpose does the gentlelady from Wyoming rise?
I move to strike the last word, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I also rise in opposition to the amendment by the gentleman from the state of Washington. The best way to manage wolves is to let state experts do the job. Now, that's true whether you want to increase the number of wolves in your state, like the gentleman from the state of Washington wants to do, or you want to maintain a recovered population, which is what we want to do in my state of Wyoming. Now, the truth about current wolf management is that if Washington wants to try to increase the wolf population in western Washington, they cannot do it under the current rules. And in my state of Wyoming, when asked at our committee meeting whether the wolf was fully recovered in the state of Wyoming, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service testified that yes, the gray wolf is fully recovered in the state of Wyoming, has been for a long time. I will.
I appreciate that very much. I think the problem is that the state of Wyoming, unlike Idaho and Montana, has not come up with a plan where the state would protect the wolf if it were delisted.
Reclaiming my time, I'm coming to that. The state of Wyoming has a wolf management plan that was approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as adequate. And then subsequently, through litigation upon litigation upon litigation, the courts changed their mind. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service changed its mind. The court changed its mind again. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service changed its mind again. So this is a process that is driven by litigation, not by science, because the science and the numbers both say that the gray wolf is recovered in Wyoming. Wyoming has a wolf management plan on the books. However, what we are saying here with this amendment is that the state of Wyoming, through its governor, will negotiate changes to that management plan, which, when agreed to with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and submitted to the Wyoming legislature, will not then be subject to additional whipsaw litigation. That'll be the end of it, returning management of wolves to the state experts that should be doing this job. Wolf management is frozen, and it need not be. By trying to strip this language, the gentleman from the state of Washington emboldens the people who don't want Washington State or Oregon or Wisconsin or Michigan or Wyoming or any other state to make its own decisions using its own wildlife biologists. I believe that state wildlife experts, not D.C. cube dwellers, have the expertise and the knowledge and the passion to manage the wolf anywhere they roam. It is the intent of this legislation as currently written to make sure that the people who have the science, the background, the knowledge, to make sure that the wolf, which has admittedly been recovered, admittedly by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recovered, to be managed in a way that ensures that ongoing recovered status and ensures it at the very level where you're able to do it, where the boots are on the ground of the wildlife biologists and the paws are on the ground of the wolf that is already recovered but that needs to be maintained pursuant to a wolf management plan. Let's trust our states, their wildlife biologists. Let's trust my Wyoming Game and Fish Department, that has been recognized as one of the best wildlife management agencies in the country. I'm stunned that people in Washington really believe that they can do it better and make decisions for wolves they've never seen, in places they've never been, and don't trust wildlife biologists they've never met. It is much better if the people on the ground, where the wildlife are on the ground, where the interaction is on the ground, where the conditions are understood, where the geography is known, where the life expectancy, where the birth rates, where the survivability of the species can be witnessed and determined. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired.